Workplace environments. The alarm sounds, you prepare for the day, and before long, you're navigating toward the space where you'll spend approximately 8 to 9 hours each workday, roughly a third of your waking life. Whether corporate office, home study, retail floor, manufacturing facility, or mobile arrangement, your work environment significantly shapes not just your professional performance, but your psychological well-being, energy levels, thought patterns, and emotional state. Despite this profound influence, workplace environments often receive less psychological consideration than other spaces, with functional concerns frequently overshadowing human experiential needs. This chapter explores the complex relationship between workplace design and psychological functioning, examining both the subtle environmental factors that influence work experience and the practical strategies for creating more psychologically supportive work settings. Understanding these connections allows you to make more informed choices about your work environment, whether you're selecting between workplace options, modifying existing spaces, or advocating for organizational changes that better support psychological well-being. The evidence base. How workplace design affects psychology. Research increasingly reveals that workplace environment quality influences far more than comfort or aesthetic experience. It fundamentally shapes cognitive function, emotional state, social dynamics, and even physical health through multiple interconnected pathways. This growing evidence base has transformed workplace design from primarily aesthetic consideration to strategic factor affecting organizational outcomes through its impact on human psychological performance, cognitive performance, and environmental factors. Perhaps the most thoroughly documented workplace environment effects involve cognitive function, how environmental qualities influence attention, memory, problem-solving, and other thinking processes essential for knowledge work. Research demonstrates that specific environmental factors can either support or significantly hinder these mental processes through both direct physiological pathways and indirect psychological mechanisms. Workplace cognitive function isn't just about individual capability, but about how environment either facilitates or impedes that capability. Even highly skilled professionals experience significant performance variation based on environmental conditions, with research showing measurable differences in cognitive task performance based solely on workplace environmental qualities. Key environmental factors influencing workplace cognitive function include: light quality stands among the most significant yet often overlooked cognitive influences. Research consistently demonstrates that workers with access to natural daylight show approximately 10 to 15% better performance on tests of working memory, information processing, and creative problem-solving compared to those under conventional artificial lighting alone, according to a comprehensive review by Boubakri et al. 2014 in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine. These effects operate through both circadian regulation pathways and direct alerting effects of full-spectrum light exposure. A significant study by the California Energy Commission, Heshong et al. 2003, found that call center workers processed customer service requests approximately 6 to 9% faster when seated near windows compared to similar workers without daylight access. Similarly, research on standardized testing shows students in classrooms with adequate daylight scoring 7 to 15% higher than those in artificially lit rooms, with performance differences increasing for tasks requiring sustained attention. Heshong et al. 2002. The cognitive benefits of daylight appear related to both spectral quality and variation patterns. Natural light contains the full spectrum of wavelengths, including blue light that suppresses melatonin and enhances alertness, while also providing subtle intensity and directional changes that maintain visual interest without creating distraction. Acoustic conditions similarly demonstrate substantial cognitive effects, particularly for tasks requiring working memory, the cognitive system allowing simultaneous holding and processing of information. Studies consistently show that unpredictable background noise, especially including intelligible speech, significantly impairs working memory performance by activating what neuroscientists call involuntary attention capture, automatic processing of potentially relevant sounds that diverts resources from intentional cognitive tasks. Research from the University of California, Janke et al. 2013, found that workers in open offices without adequate acoustic management experienced approximately 15 to 20% more working memory errors and took significantly longer to complete complex analytical tasks compared to those in acoustically controlled environments. These effects appeared most pronounced for tasks requiring what cognitive scientists call mental recursion, thinking that builds upon itself rather than processing discrete information units. The cognitive challenge of poor acoustics isn't just about volume, but about information content. Background conversations containing potentially relevant information create what we might call attention-switching costs, as your brain involuntarily processes speech for potential relevance before returning to the intended task. These micro-interruptions collectively create significant cognitive load. Air quality represents another significant cognitive factor operating largely below conscious awareness. Research demonstrates measurable cognitive effects from carbon dioxide levels commonly found in inadequately ventilated office buildings. A Harvard University study, Allen et al., in 2016, found that cognitive performance scores were significantly higher, approximately 61%, in environments with enhanced ventilation compared to conventional office conditions, with particularly strong effects for crisis response, information usage, and strategy development. Complex cognitive functions particularly relevant to knowledge work. These effects appear related to both oxygen availability and the presence of various volatile organic compounds, VOCs, that affect neural function even at concentrations below odor detection thresholds. The cognitive impact becomes particularly significant in shared workspaces with inadequate ventilation relative to occupant density, creating what building scientists call cognitive bottlenecks from accumulated carbon dioxide and other respiratory byproducts. Temperature also shows consistent cognitive effects, with research identifying optimal ranges for different types of thinking. Studies demonstrate that cognitive performance peaks between 70 to 72 degrees, 21 to 22 degrees, for most analytical tasks requiring concentration and detail orientation, while slightly warmer temperatures around 77 degrees, 25 degrees, appear more conducive to creative thinking and idea generation. Hedge et al., 2005. Performance declines become significant below 68 degrees, 20 degrees, and above 80 degrees, 26.5 degrees, for most cognitive tasks. Different cognitive processes appear to have slightly different optimal temperature ranges. The research suggests that workplaces supporting diverse thinking modes might benefit from temperature gradient zones rather than uniform settings, slightly cooler areas for analytical work and slightly warmer ones for creative collaboration. Beyond these specific factors, research increasingly recognizes the importance of what cognitive scientists call environmental congruence, the alignment between workspace qualities and cognitive task requirements. Studies show that performance improves when environmental conditions match cognitive needs, with different tasks benefiting from distinct environmental characteristics. For example, tasks requiring focused attention show better performance in environments with reduced visual complexity, controlled sound levels, and moderate privacy, while creative ideation benefits from environments with greater visual stimulation, ambient background sound, and more expansive spatial qualities. This finding suggests that optimal cognitive environments aren't universal but task-specific, requiring either diverse workspace options or adaptable settings that can be modified for different cognitive modes. Psychological restoration in workplace settings. Beyond supporting active cognitive performance, workplace environments significantly influence what psychologists call restoration capacity, the ability to recover from mental fatigue, emotional strain, and attentional depletion that naturally occur during work activities. Research increasingly recognizes that sustainable productivity requires not just supporting performance, but enabling regular psychological recovery within the workday. The most effective workplace environments don't just facilitate productivity, but support what we might call sustainability oscillation, the natural rhythm between energy expenditure and recovery that enables long-term performance without burnout. Without environmental support for this oscillation, workers experience gradual depletion that undermines both well-being and productivity. Research identifies several environmental qualities particularly supporting workplace restoration. Natural elements consistently demonstrate powerful restoration effects even in limited applications. A seminal study at the University of Oregon, El-Zayati, 2011, found that office workers with views of trees and sky took approximately 23% less sick leave than matched counterparts with views of built elements only. Laboratory studies show that even brief views of natural elements during work breaks improve attention restoration compared to views of built environments, with subsequent performance advantages on attention-demanding tasks. These effects appear related to what environmental psychologists call soft fascination, the gentle engagement of attention through natural elements that allows directed attention resources to replenish while maintaining enough stimulation to prevent boredom or rumination. Even modest applications like desktop plants, nature photography, or small water features demonstrate measurable restorative benefits compared to absence of such elements. What makes natural elements so psychologically powerful in workplaces is their multisensory quality. Beyond visual qualities, plants improve perceived air quality, provide subtle beneficial background sounds through leaf movement, and create microclimatic effects that collectively support well-being through redundant sensory channels. Retreat spaces, providing environmental contrast with primary work areas, show significant restoration benefits. Research demonstrates that brief usage of spaces with distinctly different sensory qualities from main work environments, quiet rooms in otherwise active settings, naturally lit areas in predominantly artificial environments, acoustically controlled spaces in otherwise noisy contexts, provides more effective recovery than equal duration breaks without environmental contrast. These spaces function as what we might call emotional regulation zones, where the sensory contrast itself helps interrupt stress activation patterns and reset psychological state. Particularly effective combinations include quiet spaces with natural elements, areas with distinct lighting quality from primary workspaces, and locations offering different acoustic properties from main work zones. Prospect refuge balance, providing both outlook and protective enclosure, consistently predicts restoration quality in workplace settings. Research shows that break areas offering what environmental psychologists call protected prospect, sheltered positions with views, support more effective psychological recovery than either completely exposed or completely enclosed alternatives. This arrangement allows simultaneous environmental monitoring without vulnerability, creating conditions for genuine mental relaxation rather than continued vigilance. The most psychologically effective break spaces combine certain key qualities regardless of specific design. Some visual connection to natural elements or distant views, acoustic separation from work activities, perceived permission to temporarily disengage from productivity, and some sense of territorial protection. These qualities contribute to what we might call psychological permission to recover that enables genuine restoration rather than merely physical pausing. Social dynamics and spatial configuration. Workplace environments fundamentally shape social interaction patterns through what sociologists call behavioral setting effects, the tendency for physical arrangements to consistently influence interaction regardless of individual personalities or intentions. Understanding these effects allows more conscious creation of workplace social conditions, supporting both collaborative synergy and individual focus, depending on work requirements. Physical workspace represents powerful social infrastructure that shapes interaction patterns more significantly than most organizational policies. Spatial arrangements create what we might call interaction probability gradients that dramatically influence who communicates with whom, how information flows, which collaborations emerge, and how group identity forms, often regardless of official organizational structures. Strategic placement of gathering nodes can dramatically influence organizational communication patterns. When coffee stations are placed at department boundaries rather than department centers, interaction studies consistently show approximately 25-35% increases in cross-departmental communication, Fayard Weeks 2007. These interaction pattern changes often create more significant organizational impact than formal communication initiatives. Privacy gradient, the spectrum from public to private space, fundamentally influences both individual comfort and social dynamics. Research demonstrates that workplaces offering what environmental psychologists call privacy regulation options, the ability to modulate exposure and accessibility, support both better individual well-being and more effective collaboration compared to environments with either uniformly public or uniformly private arrangements. Privacy isn't binary, but exists on a continuum that individuals need to navigate throughout their workday. The most psychologically effective workplaces provide what we might call privacy gradient infrastructure, a range of settings from public to private that allow individuals to match their environment to their changing psychological needs rather than forcing adaptation to fixed conditions. Territorial needs and psychological ownership. Despite increasing workspace mobility and shared arrangement models, research confirms that territorial needs remain fundamental to workplace psychological comfort and performance. Studies consistently demonstrate that what environmental psychologists call territorial satisfaction, the sense of having appropriate personal domain within workplaces, significantly predicts job satisfaction, organizational commitment, and performance quality regardless of specific workplace model. Territoriality isn't about outdated attachment to personal offices, but about the fundamental psychological need for some degree of environmental control and identity expression. Even in highly mobile or shared workplace models, territorial needs continue operating through what we might call psychological territory mechanisms that require thoughtful accommodation rather than dismissal as obsolete concerns. Research reveals several territorial dimensions particularly important in contemporary workplace contexts. Personalization opportunity, the ability to modify some aspect of workspace to reflect individual identity, consistently predicts workplace satisfaction and psychological ownership. Studies show that workers permitted even modest personalization demonstrate stronger organizational identification, higher territorial satisfaction, and better reported well-being compared to those using completely standardized environments, regardless of absolute space allocation. These effects appear related to what psychologists call identity-environment congruence, the alignment between self-concept and surroundings that supports psychological coherence. Even limited personalization opportunities, photo display, personal items on desks, choice of work tools, provide significant psychological benefit through what researchers call territorial markers that communicate both personal identity and boundary definition. What's notable about personalization effects is their psychological efficiency. Even modest personalization opportunities provide disproportionate psychological benefit relative to their practical impact, suggesting that territorial satisfaction involves symbolic representation of control rather than requiring extensive physical territory. Boundary control, the ability to regulate access and exposure, significantly influences workplace psychological comfort regardless of absolute privacy levels. Research demonstrates that perceived control over accessibility predicts satisfaction more accurately than objective privacy measures, with even modest control mechanisms providing significant psychological benefit in otherwise exposed settings. Studies show that workers provided with what designers call boundary regulation tools, movable screens, signaling systems indicating availability, scheduling control over collaborative periods, report greater territorial satisfaction and reduced stress compared to workers in otherwise identical environments without such control elements, even when actual interaction patterns remain similar. Boundary control illustrates the central importance of perceived agency in territorial psychology. The ability to influence boundary conditions, even when that influence remains largely symbolic or modest in practical impact, provides significant psychological benefit through what we might call territorial efficacy, the sense of having legitimate influence over your environmental conditions. Predictable access to appropriate spaces represents an increasingly important territorial consideration in mobile and flexible workplace models. Research shows that what facility managers call space assurance, confidence in reliable access to appropriate work settings when needed, significantly predicts satisfaction with shared workspace models, with uncertainty about space availability creating measurable stress regardless of actual space adequacy. Studies demonstrate that flexible workplace systems incorporating clear space availability information, reliable reservation systems, and appropriate space-to-worker ratios demonstrate significantly better user satisfaction than systems with identical physical resources, but poor accessibility predictability. This finding suggests that territorial security involves not just appropriate space, but confidence in access to that space when needed. Contemporary territorial satisfaction increasingly involves what we might call territorial confidence rather than permanent assignment. When workers trust that appropriate spaces will be reliably available when needed, their territorial needs can be effectively met through shared resources. When this confidence breaks down, territorial satisfaction plummets regardless of theoretical space adequacy. Natural elements in work settings. The research on natural elements in workplaces reveals some of the most consistent and powerful environmental effects on psychological functioning, with applications ranging from modest desktop interventions to comprehensive biophilic design integration. Understanding these connections allows strategic incorporation of natural elements to support specific workplace psychological needs, rather than treating such elements as merely decorative additions. Documented benefits of workplace nature. Contact research consistently demonstrates multiple psychological benefits from natural elements in workplace contexts. Stress regulation effects appear particularly robust, with studies showing that workers with natural views and or interior plants demonstrate lower cortisol levels, reduced self-reported stress, and decreased sympathetic nervous system activation compared to those in similar positions without such natural elements. These physiological effects translate to measurable outcomes, including approximately 10% lower reported tension headaches, 20% fewer reported upper respiratory infections, and significantly reduced employee turnover in departments with versus without natural elements. Attentional support represents another well-documented benefit, with research showing improved concentration, reduced errors, and enhanced task persistence in workspaces incorporating natural elements compared to otherwise identical settings without such features. These attentional benefits appear particularly valuable for knowledge work requiring sustained focus amid potential distractions, with studies demonstrating approximately 15% fewer self-reported concentration difficulties among workers with access to natural views compared to those without. Creative thinking shows consistent enhancement through natural element exposure, with studies demonstrating improved performance on divergent thinking tasks, generating multiple solutions to problems, following even brief nature contact. Research indicates that workplaces incorporating natural elements show approximately 15% higher self-reported creative satisfaction and demonstrably more innovative output compared to control environments, with effects appearing strongest for complex creative challenges requiring perspective shifts. Social facilitation effects emerge in workspaces with shared natural elements, with studies showing that common areas incorporating vegetation, water features, or natural views support more positive casual interaction, better collaborative problem-solving, and enhanced perception of colleague supportiveness compared to similar spaces without natural elements. These social benefits appear related to what environmental psychologists call shared soft fascination that reduces social vigilance while maintaining engaged attention. What makes natural elements so valuable in workplace contexts is their multidimensional impact. Unlike single-dimensional interventions that might address specific symptoms, complete natural soundscapes appear to support whole system restoration through their ecological completeness that matches what our perceptual systems evolved to process. Implementation strategies. Across workplace types, research suggests several implementation approaches for incorporating natural elements across diverse workplace contexts. Visual connection to nature consistently shows powerful effects even when other sensory aspects remain limited. Studies demonstrate that workspaces with windows offering natural views show better psychological outcomes than windowed spaces facing built elements only, which in turn show better outcomes than windowless spaces. These effects suggest prioritizing desk positioning for natural view access when possible, even if views remain partial or distant. For workplaces with limited exterior view opportunities, research supports the value of what designers call view corridors, strategic interior layout adjustments creating sightlines to whatever natural elements are available rather than blocking such views. Studies show that even glimpses of nature through distant windows provide measurable psychological benefit compared to completely internalized views. View access represents one of the most inequitably distributed workplace resources. Research consistently finds senior staff receiving offices with windows, while support staff occupy interior spaces, despite evidence that view access may provide greater psychological benefit for roles with fewer autonomy opportunities. Rethinking this distribution can create significant well-being improvements without requiring physical expansion. Interior vegetation shows substantial benefits even in modest applications. Research demonstrates that workplaces incorporating just 3 to 5 plants visible from each workstation show measurable improvements in air quality perception, reported concentration, and stress reduction compared to otherwise identical settings without plants. Lohr et al., 1996, Ranas et al., 2011. These effects appear to operate through both actual air quality improvements and psychological association benefits. Studies indicate that certain plant varieties provide particularly strong psychological benefits in workplace settings. Species with rounded leaf forms rather than spiky or angular shapes, medium growth stature, neither requiring frequent maintenance nor outgrowing spaces, and moderate leaf density, providing visual softness without excessive space occupation, show the strongest positive associations with workplace well-being outcomes. The psychological benefits of workplace plants extend beyond individual responses to include what we might call biophilic community effects. When plants require some basic collective care, they often create small but meaningful shared responsibility that indirectly enhances workplace community. Research observes more offer-help behavior and casual conversation in planted versus unplanted areas, suggesting social as well as individual benefits. Natural materials and patterns provide another implementation pathway, with research showing that visible natural materials like wood and stone Nature-inspired patterns in furnishings and finishes, and biomorphic forms mimicking natural structures all provide measurable psychological benefits compared to synthetic alternatives, though typically less pronounced than actual nature exposure. Studies indicate that natural material applications providing both visual and tactile contact, touchable wood surfaces rather than merely visible wood elements, for example, create stronger psychological benefit than visual-only implementations. This finding suggests prioritizing natural materials in high-touch surfaces like desk edges, door handles, and chair arms when complete natural material use proves impractical. Natural materials create what we might call sensory confirmation loops where visual and tactile perception reinforce each other. When you see wood grain and then feel congruent texture upon touching the surface, it creates stronger biophilic response than when visual perception suggests natural material, but touch reveals synthetic substitute. Daylight optimization represents perhaps the most fundamentally important nature connection strategy, with research consistently showing powerful psychological benefits from appropriate natural light exposure during workdays. Studies demonstrate that workplaces maximizing controlled daylight penetration, providing adequate illumination without glare or overheating, show significantly better outcomes for mood regulation, sleep quality, and cognitive performance compared to primarily artificial lighting approaches. The research particularly highlights the importance of what lighting designers call daylight distribution quality, how natural light spreads throughout spaces, rather than creating harsh contrast between overbright and dim areas. Architectural strategies that bounce daylight deeper into spaces through light shelves, reflective surfaces, and strategic openings show better psychological outcomes than approaches allowing direct penetration near windows, but leaving interior spaces artificially lit. Daylight represents the most fundamentally important natural element in workplace environments because it directly regulates both psychological and physiological functioning. Adequate daylight exposure literally sets workers' internal clocks, influencing not just daytime alertness and performance, but subsequent sleep quality and broader health outcomes that extend well beyond the workplace itself.